First season since taking over the licence from Jeremy Tree in 1990. Roger Charlton won 2 derbies and finished second in another. Harry Charlton is now the sole licensee at Beckhampton. He took 4 horses to Royal Ascot, and with a bit more fortune, he'd have won with 3 of them. As it was a victory and 2 narrow seconds. Can it continue? You fancy, given this lineage, it probably will. Harry, good morning.
Morning, Nick.
Good to see you. Let's just reflect on Ascot first of all. Coin toss, and you'd have been 3 winners.
Yeah, I think you go in there expecting to have a winner or 2 if you're lucky, and then you go close to winning 3 and you're upset, but at the same time you're delighted that all 3 of them have run very well, and they've all run to their marks essentially, and just maybe a little bit unlucky not to win 2, maybe 3.
When you go out the 3rd time to saddle Hand of God, are you thinking at that point, yeah, it's just not my week, I'm not getting the rub of the green here?
Yeah, just mild doubts just before you do it, but actually he was the one, I told quite a few people before the week that I thought he was our best chance of the week, mainly because he was rated 91 and was running in a handicap, and I thought he was of similar level to the other 2, and therefore he had a better chance. But yeah, of course, mild doubts do come into it. But I actually was surprisingly positive to ITV and at the races, just saying, look, we think he's a good horse. You know, he should be bang there. Was my thought before the race. And
have you come to realise that is also part of the game now, that whatever you're feeling inside, there is a certain way you have to project yourself to keep everyone feeling good?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I remember Dad used to kind of slightly run away from doing interviews just before races, and you know, I'm not superstitious in the sense that I think if you do one, it makes a difference, and therefore it's promotion, and you know, why wouldn't you spend as much time doing it as you can?
Okay, so just going all the way back, I mentioned you're now the custodian, as your father always described himself as the custodian of Beckhampton, and I guess that's you now. How much do you remember of his very early days as a trainer?
Quite a lot. I mean, I think when you're part of a family business, as it were, you're deeply involved every day. Every runner, every winner, every loser is felt. You know, it means something to everyone in the village, everyone in your family. So, yeah, we were, Tom and I especially, Tom's obviously 9 years younger than me, but were heavily interested from a young age, and therefore it's always been very important. I guess the 1990 derby, I was only 5, so I can't say I remember it, but I do remember coming home from school and watching the replay, and I remember the party afterwards. But yeah, that was slightly early in my era, as it were. Did
you have a sense of something significant has happened here? Did you at least feel that? Could you at least, as a 5-year-old boy, realise that there was probably quite a bit? Yeah, I do actually remember the video and watching it in the room. I watched it in Mum and Dad's old house, and so yeah, it obviously has sort of struck a. You know, there's lots of stuff you don't remember in your early years, but I do remember watching the replay that day quite a few times. So it obviously was something I do remember, and it being significant. And I think Dad, you know, I think it was an amazing kind of start to his career, and his main takeaway was always that Jeremy had said, I'm afraid I've left you with not much for next year. And given they had 15, I think they had 15 3-year-old colts and 3 that were Southable not supplemented for the Irish Derby, would have won all 3. With 3 different colts, yeah.
With 3 different colts.
Which is nuts, really.
Which is nuts. And this year, having the 3 horses I had at Ascot, look, they're not 3 Derby winners, but they're, you know, 3...
They're 3 nice ones, though, aren't they?
North of 110 Timeform horses, and maybe we didn't necessarily think that we had them at the end of last year either. So, yeah, there's some similarities.
You mentioned your brother Tom came along 9 years after you. You'd had the place yourself to that point. How was that?
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, he's so much younger than us that. He felt like a sort of a second wave of a second sort of kid, as it were, and he was massively into racing, and we kind of, you know, we dare I say it, it's our main topic of conversation still.
I think we're just going to take a little bit of a break because we've got a few sound issues. So I'm just going to hold it there for the moment. Harry, thank you. We're going to take a little break, sort this out. We'll be right back.
Luck on Sunday, brought to you by Whirlpool. Bet with the world. The all-new racingtv.com, your home of live British and Irish racing. Take your racing viewing to the next level across mobile, tablet and desktop. With Racing TV Extra quad and pop-out screen options, you will never need to miss a minute of action again from any of our 61 racecourses. What's more, our expert tipsters are now providing daily video tips, and you can watch key video form clues all in one place. Plus, with our new improved race cards, fast results and HD replays, you'll have everything you need to find your next winner at your fingertips. It's also never been easier to apply for our club days, so apply for a free day's racing for you and a friend now, and we'll see you at a racecourse soon. What are you waiting for? Head to racingtv.com or scan the QR code now to see for yourself. Luck on Sunday, brought to you by Whirlpool. Bet with the world.
Welcome back. All good here. We put 20p in the meter and we're good to go again. Harry Charlton, my guest today. We were talking about your younger brother Tom coming along 9 years later. Of course, he got married earlier this week.
Yeah, he got married in Sicily earlier in the week, which is why I've slightly lost my voice. And no, it's good. He's down in Sydney, about to take on training down in Sydney. So we're 9 years apart, but sort of heading in the same direction.
But you're a pretty close-knit group, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely. You know, I think you can't. People always talk about how racing families will often stay in the training business. They are family businesses, and one of the key aspects of becoming a trainer is having a place to train in, and it's a pretty restrictive barrier to entry, and therefore it makes sense that, you know, whether it's the Hillses or the Hannons or whatever, it makes sense that they run through the families or the Johnsons. So it's when someone like Mark Johnson builds up a place like he has, it makes sense that it will carry on in his family.
I don't know if this was the case for you, but it also strikes me that it's just not something you can shut the door on. You can't walk back in the door and shut the door and say, right, on with my family life, because the horses are all OK and they're all there. Yeah,
I mean, you know, Dad still will go round the bottom yard at 9 o'clock at night, and I go round our top yard at 9 o'clock at night. It's prohibitive, you know. It's the nature of the business of you know, trying to be a good trainer. You've got to be heavily involved in your yard 7 days a week and most of the weeks of the year.
When you were at school as a kid, did you think that you would be a trainer?
I did, and Dad spent a lot of time trying to convince me that it wasn't the right thing to do. I grew up watching, you know, Luca Kamani's his best friend, and kind of admiring those kind of people and how they trained and wanting to do what they did. And then Dad could have a bad year, say, and you think, well, hang on a minute, is this what you want to do? But he insisted I went to university. He insisted I got a proper job.
Were you academic at school?
Semi, you know, academic enough that I should have gone to uni, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. So after school...
So you'd quite happily have not gone to university?
No, so I didn't apply for university, and it went down quite badly. And I did a year with Charlie Appleby when I left school, so a bit in Dubai, a bit in Newmarket.
So he'd already taken over the licence?
No, he was under... it was a Dubai year. They had... what was he called? Double barrel name. I can never remember his name. There was someone who kind of stepped in, and Charlie was his assistant. And it was just when they had the first split between, there was a Saeed and a separate yard. Mm-hmm. And so I did a year then, and assuming that I would just carry on doing something in racing. And Dad was pretty insistent that I then went to uni. And on getting a degree, he said, well, hang on a minute, you may as well use that degree. And then went to Deloitte for a few years, and then on to another job.
So you were an accountant?
I am, yep.
You are? Sorry,
I am.
I like this. I am an accountant, yeah.
Jim Bolger and I are accountants, so yeah.
But that is always a fantastic skill to have, isn't it? A fantastic training to have.
I think so, actually. And if you look at so many people who go into the training business, they they maybe have come up from being a stable lad or a head lad or an assistant, and then they get their opportunity to become a trainer. And the one thing that they haven't actually done is learned how they're very good with the horses, they might be very good with people, but the one thing they may not be so good with is actually running a business. And let's be honest, these are, we probably employ 45 people. They're high turnover businesses with lots of different staff, so it does involve quite a lot of financial knowledge to run one.
So how long were you an accountant for? Sorry, you are an accountant. How long were you a practising accountant for?
3 years with Deloitte, which is a standard thing of qualifying and then disappearing. And then I did 2 more years afterwards in the city.
Right, and were you working very long hours? Were you one of those young bucks on the treadmill?
Yes, I think I actually held the record 1 year in Deloitte, and so yeah, I went into it thinking
you held the record.
I did some crazy hours in my first.
Go on, give me an indication, because
I can't remember.
People because it's interesting because people in racing talk about how hard they work, etc., 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 and I think jobs in the city are looked upon by people who are not in the city as flash guys going in suits and just earning lots of money.
Oh no! I mean,
just when you start out.
Make no mistake, it is 18-hour days in front of a spreadsheet. It's pretty miserable, and it doesn't pay that well, but it's a good grounding for going on to do more. I happen to get onto a FTSE 100 client, and therefore the hours in certain months of the year were taxis home at 2 in the morning, back in at 7. It's not glamorous, but it was. I weirdly quite enjoyed it. It's like you're having a sort of battle with something, and it's not unenjoyable, but it's pretty tough.
You're pleased you have done it?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, rather than the actual execution of it at the time.
No, I think you learn a lot of skills, and so it was great. And luckily, at the time, I didn't have a wife, and you didn't have children. You can do that kind of thing because you don't have any. You don't have anyone to answer to. You can just work in those years. And also, presumably, to what extent does it teach you a great deal of perseverance, that you're not going to give up? Yeah, I think so. Lots. I mean, don't get me wrong. Everyone who's been through that sort of 3 years of accountancy will tell you sort of nasty stories, and it's. But yeah, it sets you up for life, and that's why lots of CEOs of big companies and FTSE 100s all started as accountants. And that's where you could have been if you'd stayed on that path. And then you'd have been earning gazillions, and you'd never have to worry about keeping a load of horses sound. Yeah, scarily so. I'm 38 now. My cohorts, my generation, are now the partners in Deloitte. If you'd stuck with it, it's possible you could have been there, and you are then pretty set for life. But it got to the point where I was willing to do the hours, but if you don't love it, what is the point of kind of continuing to do it when you know you want to do something else down the line, which is, I'd always known I wanted to go back into racing. So I got to 5 years in, and people start saying, who wants to do this piece of work overnight? And I was like, do I actually? Because what's it leading to if I'm going to walk away from this job? And that was when I said, look, now it's time to switch back to racing, which was 2013-14. And you've combined two great racing dynasties as well, because you're married to Georgina, who was Crisford. Yep. How much does it help having a wife who is, or partner who is from a racing family? It helps a lot. So Georgina's not involved in the business, will come racing if I need her, but she has a job, and she's not one like Mum to be working in the office. She doesn't actually think it's particularly healthy to be forcing herself into the office, which I agree with, and but it helps because she knows that yesterday I was going to be racing and I won't be helping the kids. And on a Sunday morning, I'm going in at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I might not be back till 10 or 11. And so it helps that she has an understanding of what the game is. And going back to your childhood, was that very much the same with your parents? Yeah, so Mum actually does work in the business, always has. Mm-hmm. So Mum and Dad worked closely together. So yeah, it was slightly different. I do think it is tough on. It can be tough on kids growing up in a racing industry where their parents are working continuously. So yeah, I think it's great that she's not involved because A, she has her own life, and B, you know, the kids need one of us.
And then, of course, can you see yourself, however many years down the track, trying to persuade your own children to go to university and go into accountancy?
Well, yeah, people keep saying, oh, are your kids into racing? And
a bit early yet, isn't it?
Yeah, well, they're 6 and 3, but the elder one is bored miserably by it, thinks it's boring that it's on the TV all day, sees horses every morning. So when someone says, oh, do you love horses? She doesn't, because it's not something new to her. It's not, she's spoilt. She's been surrounded by horses and she can go riding when she wants, but she's not that into it. So I don't think anyone needs to be forced into horses or horse racing, as it were.
So it's been a lovely slow burn for you in some ways, hasn't it? Probably doesn't feel like it, but you've had that decade back at Beckhampton. Before then, it was officially a dual licence, and now, I guess, has much changed in that period or not?
Not really. I think we tweak, anyone who runs any business tweaks stuff daily, whether it's hay, food, you know, riders or whatever. You're constantly tweaking to achieve the best you can, but I don't think anything too drastic's changed. And there was actually an article on Beckhampton earlier in February or March from Lewis Porteous, and he pointed out that it felt like Beckhampton hadn't changed since the 1800s, and it's fair to say it hasn't really. I'm the 8th trainer there since 1830, I think. All the others have won classics, so that's one for me to try and achieve. But the place as a whole and the gallops haven't really changed. And quite often you'll get people saying, oh, do you not think you should do that? And Dad quite often says, well, this is what Fred Darling installed, and he had 7 Derby winners in 20 years. You know, he knew what he wanted and he did it right. So yes, science and technology tweaks things, but the basics of training a racehorse are the same.
And how much pleasure does it give you to realise that you're in this place that's been nurtured and cherished by so many people?
Yeah, it's an amazing place to work. Every morning you're, you know, driving around thinking this is... I still don't think I could train in Newmarket or Lambourne. Having been so spoilt watching Dad train at Beckhampton, I'd find it tough to move into a training centre. You're doing everything on your own terms, on your own gallops. You're not racing to beat people onto the grass. You're not sharing pieces of grass with 2,000 horses. It's exceptionally spoiling, and therefore, yeah, it's a massive privilege.
And in terms of the race for owners, the race for business success, how conscious are you of that side of the business, of not letting that slip?
Yeah, massively. I think that's probably what is harder when you're out of a training centre. You're slightly forgotten. You're not as visible to owners that might visit Newmarket or might visit Lambourne. It's a matter of trying to get people to realise that there are places outside of the training centres. And I think if you look at, you know, some of the big up-and-coming trainers at the moment, they are outside Newmarket. The next generation below the top 2 or 3 in Newmarket right now are actually outside of Newmarket. So there is a bit of a shift. But yes, we have to survive in expensive places like Beckhampton, you need a full yard and you need group horses, and Group 1 horses especially. And
do you feel that you needed to be really quite firmly entrenched for those owners to take you seriously is the wrong word, but you know, respect you? This year needed to be good, for sure, because I think when Dad had been at Beckhampton since 1979 and had trained since 1990, and then you're an assistant under the radar and then a dual licence, and it's a perfectly natural thing for someone to say, well, hang on a minute, is it just Roger in the partnership, and what does Harry add? And still, I don't think it, you know, I'm not saying I've done anything special this year that's meant that we've had a good start and winners at big festivals and stakes winners. It's actually, I've still got the same team of staff, same team of horses in the same gallops. It's just been a good year and they've run well and we've won the right races. But now is the time to sort of say, look, this guy can do it. And, you know, I think there's a bit of a trend for young trainers get flocked to if they have winners, and you kind of have to hope it happens to you and ride that wave when it comes. Of all the trainers that I've spoken to on this show, your father would be one of the most interesting, most thoughtful, most interesting different, I guess. How do you two rub along? How do you get along?
Good, because...
Always have done?
Yeah, because if your main aim is the benefit of Beckhampton, if it's not me, it's not him, it's Beckhampton, the business, Beckhampton, the stables, Beckhampton, the village. All the lads, 85% of the lads live in the village. It's a community. So whether it's my name on the top or his, for the last 10 years, we've always just wanted to do well. And I think you kind of spur each other along by, him saying, oh, don't you think you should be doing that? Or me saying, don't you think you should be doing that? And no business can work without disputes or queries, because it can't just be one of those businesses. Because it's a family business doesn't mean you can't argue or have different views. If you have a board on top of a FTSE 100, they need to debate and argue, and that shouldn't be any different in a family business.
And are you similar in temperament or not?
Yeah, I think probably. He says more laid back, but
he thinks you're more laid back.
Yeah, well, he has a very good from the outside, he's exceptionally laid back.
He's talked very openly about his own sort of personal struggles.
Yeah, inside he would be a bit more stressed, and kind of things get beat, and he gets kind of a little bit more upset. But I'm actually, maybe it's a part of our generation, but I'm just a bit more, this is life. King's Gambit gets beat, it's no one's fault. He had a bad trip, he didn't win, but the horse ran well. There's not much more you can do about it. So I don't think you can beat yourself up about it.
Mm. And just on a day-to-day basis, in terms of division of responsibility?
Yeah, so previously, I guess it's been shifting for the last 10 years. He has sort of said, finances, you, but he obviously still keeps an eye on it. He's always been very good talking to the owners. This year, that's had to shift more towards me. And I was probably doing more in the yard than he was in the last 5 years. And it's quite hard to say to a 75-year-old, right, your job is now, doing bandages and blah, blah, blah. That's not the case. He's just involved, but letting me do what I want, and take, as he says, letting me take the difficult calls, whether it's which jockey rides, which race you're running in, when you're running it, when you're working it. But he's there in the background, and if I had a discussion, do you think we should do this, do you think we should do that? He's obviously an incredible sounding board. And
he would hate me to make him sound like he needed your charity or anything like that, but do you get pleasure out of the idea that he's now actually getting pleasure out of the business that he's put so much into without having to shoulder the full responsibility?
Yeah, definitely. And I think you forget, people in racing, he probably hadn't been on holiday for more than a week for, I don't know, since he was 20, because you don't feel like you can go away. So
not everyone is as diligent as that.
No, there are people.
There's plenty of entitled people in the sport.
For example, this February he was able to go and visit Tom. Was it this February? He went. The previous month he was able to go to Australia, see Tom, because he knew that I am now there and I'm singing from the same hymn sheet as him, and it's a more comfortable leave from the business. Does he get more pleasure? Yeah, I think probably still massively competitive and getting pleasure when they're winning. I don't think he gets pleasure from watching losers.
Because not all parents are so generous to their children. I don't mean financially or in terms of what you're left or whatever, or the legacy, but generous in spirit. Especially fathers and sons. There can often be that kind of competitive tension, can't there? And if you suddenly went and had a Derby winner tomorrow or whatever. I sort of get the feeling that he's not like that.
No, he'd be delighted. Yeah. No, I think he was probably worried handing it over that we maybe didn't have some good horses to go to war with, but as it turns out, probably got 5 horses rated over 110. So, if I was starting afresh, that's pretty abnormal and a lovely position to be in.
Are you enjoying this?
There will be times when the horses aren't running well and it will be less enjoyable. But when they're going to races, running their race, winning and placing, it's hard not to love it, and it's something that I always wanted to do. So you have no regrets? No, and people say that to me sometimes. Georgina, she said, "Yeah, God, I wish you were still in Deloitte or whatever." But that was 10 years ago. I'm long gone from a London life, so it's this is the best possible job for me and the one that I always wanted to do.
And do you ever look at your brother, who's quite a different character, I think, isn't he? In Australia,
Yeah.
probably suits him extremely well.
Yeah.
Do you ever look at him and think, God, they've got it all over there?
They do. I mean, I think it's hard. I don't actually. I mean, it's a bit like politics, or it's a bit like the running of the British racing. I try not to get too embedded in it. You have to, because it's your job and you spend a lot of your time talking about it. But there's not a lot I can change, and therefore I think it's a part of our generation. You know, Mum and Dad and my father-in-law, they watch the news before they go to bed, and it's depressing. You know, I don't actually want to be involved in watching 5 depressing news stories from around the world or reading about racing's finances in the morning. There's nothing I can actually do about it. Therefore, all you can do is the best in your business or your line of work.
And hope you then contribute to the greater good.
Exactly.
But of course, there's plenty of people in your position, and you will, if it hasn't already happened, be called upon to be the next president of the National Trainers Federation or whatever. I mean, it's a certainty. Yeah. It's a certainty.
Yeah.
Young, articulate, smarter than the average bear trainer. Thank you very much. Can you come and advocate for us?
No, don't get me wrong.
When that comes.
What Rafe does is incredible, because he puts... he understands it. He's put himself in a position where he's very well read, knows everything, what he's talking about. He manages to run a very successful business and find time to do it, which is obviously laudable. And yes, as you grow through the business, and I mean, I think Rafe's been training, I don't know,
20-odd years?
20 years, I'm going to say. So he's had a long time in it, and yes.
Thank me for that. I think it might have been a bit longer.
As you go through your career, you pick up and learn, and you become more able to add to the debate. I did, you know, for example, I did a couple of years on the Racing Pattern Committee, and it's interesting and it's great, and there's lots of people trying to do the right thing for racing in all these committees, but some of the structures above them don't allow them to achieve what they want to achieve, and therefore I find it, you know, it is a little bit depressing in that sense.
So, onwards and upwards at Beckhampton.
Exactly.
Talking of Rafe Beckett, when you rejoin us, we'll be discussing Blue Stockings' victory in the Pretty Polly Stakes yesterday, which was the highlight of a terrific card at the Curragh, and of course it's Irish Derby Day today. George Scott is in the building as well. A good old friend of yours?
Yeah, he's not someone George is a guy I see a lot, and he's a friend, but he's not someone.
Don't really like him that much. No.
It's not a dislike. It's just he lives in Newmarket and I live in Marlborough.
He'll be here anyway, and so will Matty Pleur from the Racing Post. For the moment, Harry Charlton, thank you very much.